Good afternoon, folks. Good afternoon. Speaking of which, this evening, don't miss Mark Romero's new show. It's going to be fun. It's going to be a lot of fun. It's basically a This Is Your Life, Charlie Brown. Never thought anybody would be. I just thought it. People know where to find me. Bye now. And if you don't, that's your problem. Welcome to Inside the Numbers, folks, with the People's Pundit. I'm your host, Rich Barris, the People's Pundit. Don't forget, if you like the videos, to like them and share them far and wide. All right, I'm sure everybody is going to be familiar with what I'm going to talk about. But if you're not, we're going to breeze over the report from the New York Post really quickly. Maybe get into an op-ed that I read from Greg Jarrett, which I thought was interesting. But I really think that everybody is making this about a man. And I think that there's something much, much worse about the revelations in this report. And it's incredible, by the way. I don't know if you saw it today, but the Bulwark, which is, of course, a neocon redo of the failed National Review. It's a failed paper itself. Something you guys got to understand is that a lot of these people cannot make a living in the free market. They are given millions and millions of dollars by members of the class who want you to hear a point of view. It's for the same reason that very many of these same people will give towards university endowments, and they'll give them grants in order for the university to fund polling. That's a bunch of garbage. And in case you did not hear, it was kept a secret for a while. That is one of two announcements that will be coming. And there will be more. But in case you did not hear before I get into this, because I think it's all very related, myself, right, as the director of Big Data Poll, Robert Cahaley as the director of the Trafalgar Group, Matt, of course, from Insider Advantage, and Mark Mitchell from Rasmussen Reports. We have all basically band together, call it what you will, and started an association called the National Association of Independent Pollsters. And the point of this is because all of this, too much of this is going around. And, the intelligence services you would expect to be corrupt. They're a bureaucracy, right? All of these very typical and very corruptible institutions and facets to our society, that are either directly or loosely associated with politics and elections and the machinations of our government, that those are the institutions that you do expect to be corrupt. However, polling should not be one of them. There is a role that polling serves. And when they are corrupted, unfortunately, they have become, then this whole thing is pointless. I mean, us doing this, we just become one of these, nameless faces that is trying to serve you an agenda, or serve you a narrative. And that's not what George Gallup believed. That's not the Gallup vision. That's not, and so many of us who came after him and the gold standard that was that organization, call us crazy. But the four of us do believe in that vision. And that is very simple. That you are basically a conveyor of public opinion, and you serve almost like a public servant serves. And your capacity is to give lawmakers and elected officials altogether accurate assessments of public sentiment, preference, whether it's issues, elections. And that has to be delivered to them in a trustworthy and accurate fashion. And then the second part of that is the voters need to know that what you're putting out is real, is an assessment of public opinion, not an attempt to influence public opinion, which we would expect from the topic of today's show, which is the intelligence agencies, right? And outgoing partisan administrations, of course, that did not like your decision. and decided, a few of them at the helm, because as the report will show, and we'll read them in a bit, not everyone at CIA wanted to go along with what John Brennan was doing. Not everybody at the FBI. However, they sat there like cowards and did nothing because, of course, these institutions are deeply corrupt. And whether they're afraid, whatever, maybe Lauren, I was just having dinner with a whistleblower from the FBI. They ruined this guy. And some of you may know who he is. I'm going to blow his name out there, but they took his pension away, everything. Now he's gotten it back under Donald Trump, but he lived for years, damn near destitute, and ruined, stripped of his security clearance, all because he did the right thing. So there should be many more people like him and a lot less people than the people we're going to read about. But we started this organization because public polling cannot be one of those. And while there are other organizations such as APOR, right, that are out there, they have their own associations as well, that they have, like sister associations and child associations that basically raise money to funnel to other pollsters who toe the line too. And this is keeping this whole I mean, I don't want to use the C word, but this rotten thing together. And if you get out of line, you're not going to get an invite to go speak at so and so, where you'll get a cushy, fat, speaking fee. You're not going to get the contract from this organization or this university or whatever it may be. So that's this. There has to be something else. There has to be a group that has the credibility because they have the track record. And of course, the polling industry is evolving, just like everything else is evolving. And the debates over, standards, right, which have been weaponized, but the debates over standards and methodologies, they're all very important because, of course, those standards and those methodologies have evolved with the industry, but they weren't happy to have that. I mean, they have members now who last election just decided all of a sudden to try to, collect data in the ways that people like Robert Cahaly and I pioneered, and years ago were called all sorts of horrible names for it, blacklisted, right? So they were weaponizing that debate in order to control the results of public opinion polls. And while those debates, when they're valid, have their place, and when they're not weaponized, when they're earnest, they do have their place, but they have overshadowed what really matters, which is whether or not you're accurate. Because with accuracy comes trust. And trust is the vital component in the public polling industry. Otherwise, why are we doing it? We serve no role. That is the measure of our worth. Whether or not we can tell you how voters are going to vote on election day. Now, we're not all always going to be right, but that's why you have to have a long track record in order to become a member of this organization. You have had to have a public record that speaks to, not just like a one-off or a fluke or this or that. Like maybe you have a model and it works for that cycle, but it may not work for the next cycle. So I mean, you have to have demonstrated that you're doing that. And also because the pressure gets worse as time goes on. I didn't get a pat on my back after 2016. I got a dagger in it, a bunch of them, followed by a bunch of pressure to let me in the club if I decided to be like everybody else, which I did not. And now here I am. But without accuracy, you can't have the trust that has to follow. And without lawmakers or elected officials being able to trust you to be accurate, why would they listen to you about whether or not their constituencies support a public policy? Why would they? And that's what we have going on right now. We have a bunch of pollsters who can't tell you who's going to win an election, yet they're supposed to be the authorities on public policy and sentiment, economic, whatever. Please give me a break. And the voters have to trust that the public polling is accurate, because then the integrity of our system starts to crumble. Then it's more about influencing. And then one side who's repeatedly screwed, by the way, it's never both sides, and that they're only the very few of us. That's why it's not a big group. When we miss in both directions, because that's, of course, the way it's supposed to be. If you constantly miss and it benefits one party, that's not a methodological issue. That's an ethical issue. One election, okay. Two, 3, 4, 5, a decade, 2 decades. You're a con man at that point. And you're hurting the foundation of this entire system of self-governance. You have to preserve that trust, because without it, you cannot preserve the integrity of the system. It's very simple. Which is what, by the way, other areas of our society are suffering from now. Had James Comey, John Brennan, James Clapper, had they maybe considered the dire consequences of doing what they did, maybe we would not be on the brink of, well, there is a collapse in trust of these agencies. It's done. People don't trust them. People are now wondering what their functions even are. And what they did here was not just a attempt to insulate themselves from a guy they thought may be a threat to them and their way of life, their role in the government, right? Their purpose, their value, their worth. Or just let's call it what it is. He threatened their power center. People wanted change. He represented that change. They decided they didn't want to listen to you. And they fabricated a crime and then framed the incoming president for that crime. And here's the problem. I actually think that when you're doing it to the candidate, it's criminal. When you're doing it to a sitting president, it's sedition. You try to wage a soft coup against an elected president. There's no, we cannot, I'm not a lawyer, but like, let's not dance around this. The Obama administration and people who served in his administration and bureaucrats who are unelected too, but of course, appointed officials and career bureaucrats are guilty of sedition. They did not like the sovereign voters' decision and they decided they were going to overthrow it. That's sedition. Let's read the report from the New York Post. And then if we have time, we'll do an op-ed because I think Greg Jarrett does get into something here. But the real crime here is what I just described to you. It doesn't matter if it's Donald Trump or Bernie Sanders or Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. You can't have prior administration partisans and career bureaucrats who are partisans anyway. Let's call it what it is. They're all big government partisans, which means they are leftists. We cannot have them deciding that when you elect a different government, they know better than you and they're just not going to allow that government to govern. Because anytime people then say, I want change, we collectively, we want change, they're not going to let you institute it. Then this entire system is fake. And for those of you in book club, I remind you that we once read this book, Myths of Empire, Jack Snyder. And he talks about these like factions and parochial interests. When the state is off on the wrong track, in this case, he's talking about overexpansion. Okay. These factions, these special interests that came together, and by the way, government can be a special interest. Those bureaucrats we're talking about, they are an interest group. They make it very difficult to course correct. And sadly, because they do, it leads to the end of the empire. Or in this case, the end of the state. I mean, we are kind of an empire. I mean, give it what it is. I don't think that's a dirty word. I just think it's foolish. It's a foolish policy to be an empire. But because of the dynamics and, you know, they get embedded and they get ingrained, it's not like you can just turn the car around. When the country's headed off on the wrong track, it's more like a very slow turn in a boat. You know, like you're not just going to whip that puppy around, guys, and go back in the other direction and right the ship. It's going to take a very long time for that ship to turn around. And in a democratic system of government, or an self-governing society, because it's not a democracy, we were a republic for this reason, by the way. That's why doing so much damage to the Constitution with the 16th and the 17th, the log rolling deal, it made it even worse for us, because state legislatures they could have had a bigger role in righting that ship, maybe made that turn a little quicker. But now here we are, and it all sounds very well and good. You get to have a direct vote for your senator. Very good. Okay. And they get to be stuck there forever, because you don't have time to discern what is true and what is not. And you get paid by those people we were talking about earlier. All you see is the information that they want you to consume, and you buy their bullshit. And that's why the average tenure for a U.S. senator is now more than twice what it was before the 17th Amendment. Because state legislatures would have just called them back. But I digress. Let's read it. And while we are, remember, if you're a Trump supporter, if you're not a Trump supporter, it doesn't really matter. The point is not that they did this against a man or people in his orbit in order to, slow down his administration, or in order to frame him, or stymie his agenda. They did this to you. He did this to you. So now the government, in the course of less than 100 years, has decided, when they did not like the outcome in an election, or at least the public suspects this, all right? They have decided that, I don't like a president, what he's doing, we'll just blow his head off. If we can't blow his head off and put his brains in his wife's lap, we will fabricate a crime which didn't even exist. There was no crime on the books. Russia collusion. Collusion is not what the hell does that mean? It's not a legal term. They wanted you to think that this was some grand scheme to conspire with a foreign power, because Trump was some kind of a Russian asset or something, to steal the 2016 election. In reality, which many people bought, because they were told by the pollsters and others that he could not win. You understand? Again, it's all connected. Why it's also dangerous to have people doing any of this. The intelligence agencies doing what they did, the pollsters doing what they did, because you're giving the impression, well, there was no way. I mean, the polls said he was going to lose. There was no way he could win. Must be Russia collusion. They warmed the public up to believe a lie. And now we know it's a lie, which we always knew it was a lie. But here is what happened. It's last week. CIA Director John Ratcliffe did something that is very uncommon, which is to release a report, to declassify a report. And it is basically an explanation of not only the Russia collusion hoax, the process that led to that, but the report that the Obama administration issued days before Trump took office in order to attempt to whitewash the wrongdoing that occurred during the final days of the final year of the Obama administration. Again, I mean, everyone can have their opinion, I guess. I'm not a lawyer, but the bottom line is, for me, what this detail is sedition. All right. The headline, it was actually, again, it was last week that this came out, but there's new stuff that's coming up and new takes on what happened here. So that's why we're going over this. But I think that it all really does go hand in hand. And this is, we have to take a break from inside the numbers, even though it's still about that. We have to, in order to discuss what happened here, because this compromises everything. All right. The headline is Obama's Trump-Russia collusion report was corrupt from the start. CIA review, and whatever. All right. So this is by Miranda Devine. Let's get into this and read this I can't read the whole report. It's just too long. But a bombshell new and I'll link it. I'll throw it in the comment section for you guys. If you haven't read it, you should read this report. You absolutely should. A bombshell new CIA review of the Obama administration spy agency's assessment that Russia interfered in the 2016 presidential election to help Donald Trump was deliberately corrupted by then CIA Director John Brennan, FBI Director James Comey, and the Director of National Intelligence, James Clapper. Excuse me. There's new talk today that they will face perjury charges, and I am, going to leave you with the question of whether or not you think anyone will be held accountable for this, because Remember, James Clapper is the reason Edward Snowden came forward and ruined his life. All right? I mean, he's a leaker, he's a traitor. Okay. The director of national intelligence lying to Congress about a massive and unconstitutional data collection and surveillance program, which is illegal, is traitorous. Not Edward Snowden dumping it, or at least more so than Edward Snowden, dumping stuff he wasn't supposed to dump just to prove that the DNI director was lying through his teeth. And he still hasn't faced any consequences. John Brennan has lied to Congress on multiple occasions. Jim Comey has lied under oath on numerous occasions. Nothing has happened. But with this report, there does seem to be some renewed optimism that people who did this will be held responsible. Remember, we did have a special counsel. He indicted people and they were found not guilty because they were charged in the District of Columbia. And of course, you cannot get a fair trial, or justice cannot prevail in that jurisdiction. It is too corrupt. I would call it ideologically possessed. It's fanatical. Further, Brennan's decision to include the discredited Steele dossier over the objections of the CIA's most senior Russian experts, quote, undermine the credibility, unquote, of the assessment. And this is the name of it, Tradecraft Review of the 2016 Intelligence Community Assessment, the ICA, on Russian election interference, was conducted by career professionals at CIA's Directorate of Analysis and was commissioned by CIA Director John Ratcliffe in May. That report was commissioned in May, all right? But remember that the intelligence review on Russian interference in 16 was the foundation for everything they did in the House. Do you remember making Devin Nunes resign? Step aside as the chairman of the Select Committee on Intelligence in the House? The so-called credible or serious investigation, which was predicated on this report, was being done in the Senate. You remember? It was the serious one. Of course, later, Mr. Wolf was indicted. Richard Burr is where now? And why did he have to leave the U.S. Senate? Right. Both of those committees were conducting reviews based on that initial assessment. Not the one that Ratcliffe commissioned in May. He commissioned an investigation, a review of the review that John Brennan had commissioned in the final days of the Obama administration, right before Trump was ushered in. I mean, guys, it's all very hard to follow, but I mean, this is just insane. The Lessons Learned Review found that on December 6, 2016, 6 weeks before his presidency ended, Barack Obama ordered the assessment, which concluded that Russian President Vladimir Putin aspired to help Trump win the election. And again, I will share this link with you guys. You do need to read this whole thing. God, the New York Post has like way too many ads. You guys should chill the hell out with these ads. It's terrible. The review identified multiple procedural anomalies that undermine the credibility of the ICA, including, quote, a highly compressed production timeline, stringent compartmentalization, of course, and excessive involvement of agency heads. So in other words, they rushed it out. Let me translate this for you. They rushed it out. They hid it from a number of people that they knew would object to it because it was a fraud. It was a sham. And excessive involvement of the agency heads mean that people like John Brennan, people like James Clapper, and people like Jim Comey did this mostly themselves. They were too involved in it. They did not leave it to the professionals because they didn't want prying eyes to see the crime they were committing. And again, I don't know how else to say that. This is a frame job of an elected president who they were spying on, or even incoming at that time, president-elect, who they were spying on while he was the front runner for the opposing party's nomination. That in and of itself is criminal, that they were framing somebody. Then this continues when he's president. I mean, that's the thing. The scam, they all knew it was fake. And it continued even when he was president. So, I mean, again, it goes from criminal activity to a private citizen to outright sedition of an elected regime. It also questioned the exclusion of key intelligence agencies and said media leaks may have influenced analysts to conform to a false narrative of Trump-Russia collusion. Quote, the rush timeline to publish both classified and unclassified versions before the presidential transition raised questions about a potential political motive behind the White House tasking and timeline. Duh. You think anyone on the right would ever get the benefit of the doubt that something like this, so heinous, would have any motive other than a political one? The review found that Brennan directed the compilation of the ICA and that his, Comey's, and Clapper's, quote, direct engagement in the ICA's development was highly unusual in both scope and intensity, and, quote again, risked stifling analytical debate. Risked. They cherry picked who they wanted to even have a say in this thing because those people were ball players. They were in on the frame job. I mean, there it is right there. I'll take a puff after this sentence because it's important. Brennan handpicked the CIA analysts to compile the ICA and involved only the ODNI, the Office of the Director of National Intelligence, the CIA, FBI, and NSA, excluding 13 of the then 17 intelligence agencies. Why? Why? For those of you who don't know, some of these intelligence agencies are in completely different areas of the executive branch. Some of them aren't as influenced. I'm trying to carefully pick my words because I don't trust any of them. But they aren't as influenced, folks, by political appointments. Okay? He sidelined the National Intelligence Council and forced the inclusion of the discredited Steele dossier despite objections of the authors and senior CIA Russia experts, and so as to push a false narrative that Russia secured Trump's 2016 victory. Quote, this was Obama, Comey, Clapper, and Brennan deciding we're going to screw Trump, said Ratcliffe in an exclusive interview with the New York Post. It was, we're going to create this and put the imprimatur of an IC assessment in a way, of an IC assessment in a way that nobody can question it. They stamped it as Russia collusion and then classified it so nobody could see it. This is really corrupt, guys. This is beyond anything, any scam that we have seen our government pull in our lifetime. Unless, of course, you're old enough to remember when they blew Kennedy's head off. This is really bad. This is a outgoing administration who fell out of power by the voters in a free and fair election. Actually, it wasn't fair. It was completely rigged against Donald Trump, and he won anyway. That's what's so heinous about all of this. This guy wins 2 out of 3 officially elections, despite those elections being completely rigged against him. That means there's an overwhelming consensus by the public. It's a miracle this guy could win these elections. With everything. Wall Street, the intelligence agencies, the corrupt media, the Fed, everybody, foreign leaders, corporations, everybody doing everything in their power to handicap the process so that their preferred political party can win. And yet they lost. Anyway, that represents an overwhelming cry for change on behalf of the American public. I just think that back, and this needs to be noted, back in 2016, I don't think the public knew exactly what they were getting into. Okay. I don't think they understood what change really means. Okay? Like how messy is change? This led to Mueller, a special counsel Robert Mueller's inquiry, which concluded after 2 years that there was no Trump-Russia collusion. It put the seal of approval of the intelligence community that Russia was helping Trump and that the Steele dossier was the scandal of our lifetime. It ate up the first 2 years of his presidency, and then they killed the last one with COVID. They effectively negated, they erased, they vetoed your decision as the sovereign entity in this country. You are the sovereign. Trump, Obama, Bernie, whoever the hell would ever get elected to the office is just an extension of you. They're your chosen representative in a massive bureaucracy. Outside of the Pentagon, the biggest bureaucracy in the world. And you're supposed to be in charge of it. By extension, the president is the extension of you, the sovereign voter. And they did this just to basically not have to obey, respect, acknowledge your sovereignty. I don't care if you're a Republican, you're a Democrat, you're a socialist, you're a fascist, you're a greenist, whatever the hell you are. That needs to scare the piss out of you, and that needs to, frankly, make you very angry. You have to demand accountability for this. You have to. If you don't, they will run roughshod over you, no matter what. You may win an election here and there. Your guy or your girl may win over this one, over that one. It's all just a hologram. It's not real. Go ahead, try to touch it. See how solid your sovereignty is. You did. That's what 2016 was all about, even for those who are on the left. Even in 2020, you should have learned that lesson. You didn't want Joe Biden. Both times you wanted Bernie Sanders. They stole it from you. You see how Brennan and Clapper and Comey manipulated and silenced all the career professionals and railroaded the process. That's a quote again from Ratcliffe. The CIA review notes that before work even began on the ICA, quote, media leaks suggesting that the intelligence community had already reached definitive conclusions risked creating an anchoring. The term anchoring refers to a cognitive bias in psychology and suggests that the media leaks may have influenced the analysts working on the ICA to shape their findings to conform with the leaked narrative rather than conducting objective analysis. Why are they using terms that we use when we describe to you various forms of biases? Why are they even concerned with things like anchoring? Because they know. It's a part of it's literally a part of their tradecraft to know this stuff. How to dupe you, how to convince you, how to mislead you, how to misdirect, how to create narrative. On December 9th, 2016, both the Washington Post and the New York Times reported that the intelligence community had, quote, concluded with high confidence that Russia had intervened specifically to help Trump win the election. By the way, they gave each other awards for those reports, folks. There were Pulitzers given out over reporting on a fake crime, a fake event. It never happened. There was nothing at all unusual about the level of interference by a foreign power in a U.S. election in 2016. Nothing. The only thing different is that we're all living in an evolving era. We're no longer in the era of industrialization. We're not in that. We are in the technology age and the information age. We're constantly evolving. So the form that foreign interference is going to take, of course, is going to evolve with it. But it doesn't mean it was ever unusual. It was not. We now know, thanks to, again, some people in the FBI that have a spine and a moral compass, that the Chinese did exploit unsolicited absentee balloting to help Joe Biden, and that further corrupt people in the Federal Bureau of Investigation decided to cover that up. I mean, this is all very bad. The quote, oh, I forgot. The Post cited an unnamed U.S. official describing this as the IC's consensus view. The quote, highly compressed timeline was atypical for a former IC assessment, which ordinarily can take months to prepare, especially for assessments of such length, complexity, and political sensitivity, the review found. It adds, CIA's primary authors had less than a week to draft the assessment, and less than 2 days to formally coordinate it with IC peers before it entered the formal review process at CIA on December 20th. Holy crap, guys. And by the way, that is 11 days after the New York Times and the Washington Post published those reports. 11 days. This is so corrupt, so bad. When the draft ICA was completed and sent to review to the intelligence community stakeholders, the timeline was, again, compressed to just a handful of days during a holiday week, which created numerous challenges. This is all quoted. Multiple IC stakeholders said that they felt jammed by the compressed timeline. Most got their first look at the hard copy draft and underlying sensitive reporting just before or at the only in-person coordination meeting that was held on December 19th to conduct a line-by-line review. Folks, that's 2 days. Excuse me. 2 days before. That's so ridiculous. Oh my God. I'm laughing, but it's not funny. I'm actually choking on my own laughter, like the spit from my own laughter. But it's not at all funny. It's a complete and total sham. And honestly, there were some good national security reporters at the time. Now she's at CBS, but at the time she was at Fox News. Catherine Herridge trying to explain that this is not at all normal. Of course, you had people like Jennifer Griffin, who's a total neocon hack and deep state shill. All right. You had people like her. Actually, I would actually more likely classify her as a neoliberalist, but neoliberal. But, just like regurgitating the BS, but not Catherine Herridge. She was saying this is not normal. This doesn't happen like this. And oh, by the way, the Steele dossier is not a credible document. I mean, she said that from the beginning and then tried to explain to certain audiences at Fox that it is a document filled with material that is not corroborated, but sourced by something called circular reporting. And in the intelligence community, especially when undertaking assessments like this, anything that's got a whiff of circular reporting in it is always discarded. That's something that like you haven't heard for a while, and I don't watch CBS News a lot. I don't know what Catherine Herridge's posturing is now, but back then she did try to explain this to certain viewers, certain audiences at Fox News. Of course, Fox ran with it too because they're corrupt as well. But she did try to tell people circular reporting is very much a cardinal sin at this level of the IC. Assessments like that, and ones that are supposed to be thorough, like this one was, and on such politically sensitive stuff and thorough stuff, it is not supposed to include circular reporting. And circular reporting is when, let's say, you hear that there's a bit of information, you heard that somebody did this, and then what appears to be a separate source appears to corroborate that indeed person A did this. You find out that they're not different sources. In fact, they are simply the same source, just being circulated in different forms. And often it's media. The intelligence community will do this in the media to make something appear to be more credible than it is, when in fact it's the original report from the original lack of credible, source that contributed it in the first place. But you're giving the appearance that it's being corroborated. That's circular reporting. And it's, again, a cardinal sin. You don't do it. Drafts of the ICA were only, we already did that. No, we did not. Sorry. Drafts of the ICA were only permitted in hard copy, so needed to be hand carried between various spy agency buildings. Quote, the pressing timeline and limitations of hard copy reviews likely biased the overall review process. Likely. Okay. The direct engagement of agency heads Brennan, Comey, and Clapper in the ICA's development was highly unusual in both scope and intensity. This exceptional level of senior involvement likely influenced participants, altered normal review processes, and ultimately compromised analytic rigor. One CIA analytical manager involved in the process said other analytical managers who would typically have been part of the review chain opted out due to the politically charged environment and the atypical prominence of agency leadership in the process. This is disgusting. This is disgusting. The review criticizes the ICA for including the Steele dossier, a salacious and discredited opposition research product written by former British spy Christopher Steele, who was, by the way, who you also did not know, was actually thrown off the Russia desk at MI6 because they believed that he himself had been compromised by the Russians. You never heard any of that. He was then working for the Hillary Clinton campaign, which claimed Russia possessed sexually compromising blackmail material on Trump. Maggie Haberman, Natasha Bertrand, these are reporters you should never, ever listen to again. Maggie Haberman was claiming that she had no knowledge that the dossier was in fact paid by the Clinton campaign or, funded by the Clinton campaign and the DNC. I know for a fact that that is a lie. I also know that most of Maggie's sources on those stories came from Schiff's and Schiff's circle of people. He absolutely, of course, himself knew that that dossier was funded by his own party and the nominee for his party. Everybody knew it. Only when the Washington Post reported it, finally, did she try to skate around whether or not she had knowledge of it. But Natasha Bertrand, another one, consistently lied about reports surrounding Russia collusion and just regurgitated whatever they wanted her to say. By the way, that's why, we will not know the extent of damage to Iran's nuclear program. The Trump administration cannot claim that they know it's totally been obliterated. They don't know that, all right? It's too early to really do a legitimate assessment. So, obviously it's a political maneuver to, laud success and say, oh, you know what, declare victory. That George Bush was guilty of it too. Remember the whole famous scene with the ship? We don't know for sure. However, that being said, Natasha Bertrand is the one behind the CNN report saying that we did not damage the nuclear program. So she's not credible and cannot be believed. All right. I mean, that's it. That once you do this kind of thing, you can never believe that reporter again. So Maggie Haberman, Natasha Bertrand, these people have been, what's his name? Ken Dillion, right? Over at MSNBC. All of these people have been completely discredited forever. There's no way to get your credibility back, guys, after you do something like this or you partake in this, because there's no way they didn't know. They were intentionally playing a part, playing a role in a disinformation campaign to undermine a duly elected president. They're criminals themselves. Despite the fact that the ICA authors and multiple senior CIA managers, including the two senior leaders of the CIA Mission Center responsible for Russia, strongly opposed including the dossier, asserting that it did not meet even the most basic tradecraft standards, Brennan insisted it be included. CIA Deputy Director for Analysis, the DDA, warned in an email to Brennan on December 29 that including it in any form risked, quote, the credibility of the entire paper. But Brennan responded, this is a quote, that
My bottom line is that I believe that the information warrants inclusion in the report. He knew it was fake when he responded to those concerns with that in an email. He already knew it was fake. Brennan showed a preference for narrative consistency over analytical soundness. When confronted, this is all quote, when confronted with specific flaws in the dossier by the two mission center leaders, one with extensive operational experience and the other with a strong analytic background, he appeared more swayed by the dossier's general conformity with existing theories than by legitimate tradecraft concerns. Oh my God. The review further reads, the decision by agency heads to include the Steele dossier in the ICA ran counter to fundamental tradecraft principles and ultimately undermines the credibility of a key judgment. The ICA's authors first learned of the dossier and FBI leadership's insistence on its inclusion on December 20th, the same day the largely coordinated draft was entering the review process at CIA. Oh my God, man, so mad. FBI leadership made it clear that their participation in the ICA hinged on the dossier's inclusion, and over the next few days, repeatedly pushed to weave references to it throughout the main body of the ACA. And by the way, the late John McCain, unbelievable. The role he played in doing this, unbelievable, in getting it, circulating it in and around. In the end, the spy agency heads decided to include a 2-page summary of the Steele dossier as an annex to the ICA, with the disclaimer that the material was not used to, quote, reach the analytic conclusion. But that's ridiculous, as the review states. By placing a reference to the annex material in the main body of the ACA as the force supporting bullet for the judgment that Putin aspired to help Trump win, the ICA implicitly elevated unsubstantiated claims to the status of credible supporting evidence, compromising the analytical integrity of the judgment. The review is critical of these guys, of course, and says that they wanted to marginalize the National Security Council, the NIC, departing significantly from standard procedures for formal IC assessments. Hiccups. The NIC did not receive or even see the final draft until just hours before the ICA was due to be published. Oh, woo. Typically, the NIC maintains control over drafting assignments, coordination, and the review process. You gotta be kidding me. The review also quotes from Brennan's memoir, Undaunted, in which he revealed that he, quote, established crucial elements of the process with the White House before NIC involvement, stating he informed them that the CIA could take the lead drafting the report and that the coordination would be limited to ODNI, CIA, FBI, and the NSA, all people who had corrupt political appointments from Obama. So here in Brennan's own book, he directly ties the former president to this act of sedition. I don't know what else to call it. Folks, Republican, Democrat, what the hell difference does it make what's after your last name? This is our entire system is an electoral system. It's a representative system of government. You cannot have crooked politicians and rogue bureaucrats led by crooked appointees to those bureaucracies create a fiction to veto your decision. This is the T word. I think I'm being nice with sedition. This is the T word. You are the sovereign. They committed treason against you. They did. This is treason. I'm sorry. What the hell? Why is everyone so afraid to say it out loud? I don't give a damn about, Donald Trump or who the hell I don't care. He was the person the people elected. And this is a coup. The whole thing, they knew that it would be used to undermine his presidency. That's a coup. And they also tried to use it, of course, to impeach him. They used it as a pretext to run against him in the midterms. They ran national security candidates from Virginia 7 to California. Remember Dana Rohrabacher? Mike Bloomberg put millions into Dana Rohrabacher's district, citing that Dana Rohrabacher was also compromised by the Russians, and he was in on this Russia collusion to help Trump win the election. The entire thing was fake. He knew it too, and he used that fake narrative to target Republican women. He knew Harley Ruda couldn't win, but if you just kept them home, if you could just get 13, 15% of Republican women to question whether or not Dana Rohrabacher really played a role in this scam that never happened, but maybe they won't vote for Harley Ruda, but they won't vote for Dana either. And that's exactly what happened. Dana Rohrabacher didn't lose that election because he lost mind changers. He lost that election because so many of those people who were exposed to this lie, this dark art campaign, stayed home. He needed them to vote. Republicans lost the House for two reasons. Well, we can get into the minutia of it, like I told you on Monday. Democrats were smart. They ran these national security candidates, and then they threw in these little third-party challenges that they funded, named them all sorts of cute stuff, like the constitutional candidate, right? The tax reform candidate, the independence candidate, like all sorts of cute stuff. America Party. To pull a couple of points away from Republicans, failing to repeal Obamacare was impossible to argue against. For instance, Minnesota 1, 3, right? Perfect examples. One defeated congressman penned an op-ed talking about it, in fact, saying John McCain costs the House. Well, as it turns out, John McCain really did cost them the House in more ways than one. Taking his dying ass from Arizona, where he could have spent the rest of his life with his family, just to go to D.C. so he could put his crusty finger down and break a 7-year campaign promise that Republicans made to the people of the country is really narcissistic and sick. But since he had a huge hand in spreading this discredited dossier all through the intelligence community, he had more of a hand than you think. And in districts where, like Abigail Spanberger won, she won because of these national security concerns. Those used to be national security Republican voters. But under Trump, the national security bomb vaporized and went in the first Trump administration in the midterm. It vaporized the last remnants of them that used to vote for, like, Republicans, even like the Mitt Romneys and the George Bushes. They evaporated because they were told that their nominee, who they didn't like personally anyway, so it helped, it was easy for them to believe, it turned out to be an asset, a traitor. I won't say his name out loud. But this scam was the reason a certain nutcase decided that it was patriotic to go to the location where Republican members of Congress were practicing for a charity baseball game and open fire on them, where he damn near killed the House Majority Whip. Steve Scalise at the time was the House Majority Whip. He nearly killed him, and he did get 4 others. All for this lie. Big media will never tell you, but before the FBI made Mark Zuckerberg take it off his Facebook page, that is what he said. These Republican members of Congress are enabling and protecting the Russian traitor in the White House. Something has to be done about it. So he decided to get his rifle, his van, and go murder a couple of them. They're responsible for all of that. Steve Scalise's blood, it's on their hands. I don't know how this is not a crime, but I would caution people before we finish reading the end of this to expect some kind of real justice. I would not hold my breath. The review says such departures from standard procedures not only limited opportunities for coordination and thorough tradecraft review, but also resulted in the complete exclusion of key intelligence agencies from that process. The decision to entirely shut out the Defense Intelligence Agency and the Department of State's Bureau of Intelligence and Research from any participation in such a high profile assessment about an adversary's plans and intentions was a significant deviation from typical IC practices. And by the way, just to let you know, give you an idea about the Department of State's Bureau of Intelligence and Research, they're the ones that first proposed, even when Trump was still president in his first term, that the virus came from the Wuhan Institute of Virology, not a wet market. The Wall Street Journal got their hands on an assessment from the Department of State's Bureau of Intelligence and Research, as did basically every other, including this paper we're reading right now. And of course, the Washington Post and the New York Times, the Trump administration wanted them to have it, and they did not run with it. But while everyone was stuffing your head with a bunch of bullshit about a wet market, the Department of State's Bureau of Intelligence and Research was saying, no, this is a man-made virus that leaked from a lab. It was also markedly unconventional to have agency heads review and sign off on a draft before it was submitted to the NIC for review. The NIC did not even receive or even see the final draft until just hours before the ICA was due to be published. I mean, you gotta be kidding me. Brennan sent a note to the CIA workforce saying that he already met with Clapper and Comey and that, quote, there's a strong consensus among us on the scope, nature, and intent of Russia's interference in our recent presidential election. The CIA review concludes, and then we'll wrap it, with analysts operating under severe time constraints, limited information sharing, and heightened senior level scrutiny. Several aspects of tradecraft rigor were compromised, particularly in supporting the judgment that Putin aspired to help Trump win. The Putin-Trump nexus struggled to stand on its own, and its inclusion damaged the report because it risked distracting readers from the more well-documented findings on Putin's strategic objectives. Which I have to tell you, and I don't know how long some of you have been following me, but back in my PPD days, there was a story that was done on People's Pundit Daily, and it was very clear that there were people, whatever you want to call it, leaking, whatever you want to call it. Their assessment was not that Russia was trying to help Donald Trump win the election. Their assessment was that Russia was trying to sow discord on both sides. And that came from a series of things, but even things that Putin had done during the Democratic primary, right? Just to, of course, get people within America to fight and distrust and sow discontent, right? Which Democrats trying to further Obama's outgoing attempt to subvert the will of the voter, Democrats walked right into it. They were so happy to play that role. They were so happy to advance this scam, this fraud. They perpetrated a fraud on you. But it's worse than that. It's way worse than that. They didn't steal your lunch money, con you out of your lunch money. They conned you out of an election. They conned you out of a presidency. They conned you out of a chance to right the ship. This is beyond criminal. These people should be dealt with very severely. I don't want to hear about this one did that, this one did that. The FBI is indicting this guy. Oh, what a horrible crime. Look at the fraud we exposed. This should be priority one. This compromises our entire system. And the only way to make sure it doesn't happen again is to hurt the people who did this so badly that people think twice before they try to rob you of a president again. And Democrats, before you know, you sink back you retreat back into your hive mind. You need to think long and hard about what happens when they do it to you. They already killed one of your presidents and tried to kill this one. You cool with that? Because you're a freaking Democrat who lost an election? It's rather narrow-minded for somebody who considered themselves progressive, don't you think? So forward thinking, right? You're awfully backward if you think that. These people should be dealt with harshly. Harshly. Very, very long prison sentences. Very long. I mean, we could look back 10 years from now if there's like considerable political upheaval in this country and we lose what is referred to as regime credibility, right? And it doesn't really matter who we elect anymore. It falls out of favor. We lose it. Once you lose regime credibility, by the way, you don't get it back. Unless you want to name me a country that has. Good luck. You don't get it back. These guys tried to take that from you. They should spend the rest of their lives in a dark hole. Jim Comey thinks attempted assassination attempts against a former and current president are funny. He should spend the rest of his days strapped to a concrete wall in chains. Like he's a piece of shit. The guy is like Benedict Arnold level traitor. If you don't punish people who do something like this heinous, then this is all for nothing. They will just create these fictions all the time. They'll get their fake pollsters to put out their fake numbers. And when they steal one election after another from you, they'll just say, what are you talking about? It was clearly going to lose. I mean, this is, of course, the outcome we all expected, is it not? Meanwhile, in the most recent memory, I'm telling you, Kamala Harris was never ahead. Why were they setting this up? Even her own polling, as I reported to you at the time, by the way, even her own polling never had her ahead. Yet they were gearing up to do something, weren't they? Half an inch, we may never know. All right, so there it is. I mean, we can wrap that. I mean, that's it. I would say the most destructive thing you can do with intelligence is to weaponize it for one party's political gain against another, to blame an admitted adversary for something they didn't do. It was like pouring gasoline on the fire. For all of the bad things Vladimir Putin has done and is capable of doing, they didn't need to exaggerate it or run a fake story in 2017 and again in 2020 with the laptop claiming that Russia influenced the outcome. The bogus ICA is what launched the false narrative of Trump as a Russian agent. At the very least, Ratcliffe said, Brennan, Clappy, and Comer should be pariahs. These guys shouldn't have a voice. They shouldn't be able to influence the American people. Under my watch, I am committed to ensuring that our analysts have the ability to deliver unvarnished assessments that are free from political influence. I don't know, John, what the hell are you talking about? Are you going to like ban them from going on MSNBC or something? I mean, you could strip them of the security clearances. That should already have happened. I mean, that should have happened immediately during the first Trump administration, but of course they didn't, right? These guys can do whatever they want. They can write a book and make millions of dollars, right? They can go run to the New York Post and the New York Times and the Washington Post and pen op-eds defending themselves. They can go on all of these different programs like Jim Comey has been doing because of his book, right? His little book tour and sign here and do this and do that. This is a criminal act. What are you talking about? You're going to take away their MSNBC privileges? These people wiped their ass with the social contract. We should I'm down on like tar and feather these sons of bitches. Old school. Have you ever seen what happens to somebody tar and feather? I mean, it all sounds like it's a very funny affair. It's not. They should be in shackles, paraded by the monument, while Trump supporters throw tomatoes at them and shit. I'm not kidding. Like, we should humiliate these people before throwing them in a dark hole. This is very bad. And by the way, Democrats, you should be right next to MAGA, standing there, doing it too. Because you're not going to like it when they do it to you. And that's inevitably going to happen. You're just the fools they're using right this moment. They wouldn't care about your decision either. Let's say Bernie Sanders was the man he pretended to be, which he was not. He's a fraud. But let's say he was, and he became the nominee for the Democratic Party in either 16 or 20. And they tried to hoover his ass like this and subvert his government to get him in line, to get him to play ball, to get him to toe. Would you like it? Didn't you elect him for real change? It will happen to you. The only way it won't is if your guy or girl sells out. So that's the choice you have. Pathetic. The entire country should be outraged at this. This is a crime of the highest order against our against our social contract, the very heart of it. I mean, they basically nullified it. They don't need you anymore. They're going to do what's right for them, what they think is best. Your role as the voter, not anymore. That's what they said. You going to do something about it or not? I say heat up the tar, pluck the feathers, let's get rolling. All right, but I wouldn't expect it. That's my point. And I'll leave you to marinate on it, and you tell me what you think. Throw the comments in the section. We think there'll be any, because I'm already seeing people make the mistake that people like Sean Hannity made in 2017 and 18 and TikTok. Remember that, Sean? It never happened. Even when Durham was special counsel, fair guy, he 100% uncovered this was a crime. This was a conspiracy to undermine a duly elected president. He tried to get some even low-level people, but he couldn't get the District of Columbia and even the one in Northern Virginia. They wouldn't have convicted either. Like, he couldn't get a conviction because they're fanatics. So what's a guy to do? Right. There is a way around that. Jurisdiction doesn't work. Charge him with something else. Because that's what it is. And let's throw tomatoes at these fuckers. Shit'll be funny, right? Splat! I would laugh hysterically. Get my wind my arm back up. It's been a long time since I could throw that hard, guys. I don't know. I'm going to be on Mark Robert later, actually. Maybe we'll get into this, and I'll tell some of these stories. It has nothing to do with politics. It's going to be like, this is your life, Rich. And maybe something you guys don't know about me, which once upon a time I could throw very, very, very fast. I stopped playing baseball. My grandfather died. It was dumb. I should have continued it. But even, I'm not a tall guy. And I had this arm. I was at a fair with Laura a couple years ago, and they have the what's it called? Why am I forgetting the name of it? That measures how fast you throw. And I'm like, baby, I'm gonna wing this. I'm gonna do this. And she's like, you're gonna throw your arm out. That's what you're gonna do. You just can't throw a 90-mile-per-hour ball after having not thrown a baseball in years, And I'm like, second nature, First of all, I threw like 78 and my arm almost came out of the socket. So, but it was a valiant attempt. It was pathetic. I'm like, oh my God, that's a 7, which by the way is fast for most people, but that is not what I used to be able to throw. And so we'll maybe learn about, maybe you'll hear some like funny stories like that later today. It's at 6:00. I'll share it on social media. I'm sure it's going to be a lot of fun. You'll even get to see, I was able to dig up pictures of
Yeah, but the man himself who came through Ellis Island to from Italy, which is how I am here right now, you know. And there's some I mean, he's he's gangster, you'll see. But that's who my family was, and I'm proud of them regardless. So we'll have a lot of fun with that. No politics, just culture, life, and things like that. It's 3:15 now, so I'll let you go. Watch your very favorite next show. But I think that this is the worst thing that could happen to us as a self-governing society. That is the worst. What we just read, what was described, is like the biggest crime that could be committed against you and against our entire system of government and our way of life, and they should be dealt with accordingly, right? All right. But I'll let you go watch the rest of the show, see what, the rest of your favorite show, see what they say about it. Again, links are in the description. Don't forget, if you like the videos, to like them and share them far and wide. And I'll see you guys tomorrow. All right. Thanks for watching.